Is this the greatest trellis that's ever existed? Well, I'll let you be the judge of that, but first I should tell you that the inspiration for this build comes from Mitch at PNW No Dig on Instagram, and you should definitely go follow him, especially if you're in the Pacific Northwest. But I did make one small change that I think you're really gonna like. So if you follow me on Instagram, you probably saw a little while back, I got a bunch of free untreated hardwood scraps from this local table and cabinet maker. So I decided to make a P-trellis out of them. The first thing we need are 4 boards cut to equal length, and these are going to be the legs of the trellis. Now mine happened to be 5 feet because I had 2 10-foot boards to cut in half, but really you can pick whatever length you want. Next we're going to need 2 boards cut to equal length, and these are going to be just a little bit wider than the bed. So mine is a 4-foot bed, so 52 inches. And finally we need 1 board that is cut to the exact width of the bed, and this is going to be that top rail like you can see here. We're going to start by working on this joint right here where the trellis pivots. Now I use 3-inch deck screws for this joint, and these screws, they have this area at the top that doesn't have threads. And you just want to find a drill bit that is the same size as that area, so the screw not including the threads. Then we're going to measure from the top of the first set of legs. And remember, we're measuring these legs right here. Whatever your measurement is, you just want to make it so the screw lands in the center of this top rail, and that's just so we can get the strongest joint possible. So I drilled a hole right in the center of the legs at that 1-inch mark for me. And then I'm just going to hand fit the screw here to make sure that it works. It looks like it's going to, so I'll go ahead and drive it in. And then we're just going to make sure that the concept works before moving on. It looks like it does. Perfect. So we're going to repeat that process on the other set of legs. Looks like it's working. So we're good to move on. Next we need to grab that top rail. This is the one that's cut to the width of the bed. And we're going to attach these leg assemblies to this rail. But first we need to pre-drill the hole with a bit that is a bit smaller than the screw. And that's one, to ensure perfect placement, but also to remove some material so the board doesn't split when we attach the joint, just like we're doing here. And then we're going to check to make sure they still move, so we'll move on to the other side. And before moving on, I'm just going to make sure the whole concept works. I love it when a plan comes together. The last thing we need to attach are these 2 stretchers that we cut a little bit longer than the bed. Now these add some strength to the build, and they're actually what the trellis sits on top of the beds. So how high you mount them determines how much overhang the feet will have on the side of the beds. Now since we cut these boards a little bit longer, there is going to be some overhang on the edges as well. And to figure out how to place them, you just need to measure the legs center to center at the top of the assembly like this. We don't measure at the bottom because the legs aren't fixed to anything yet, so they don't have a solid position. So measure this top position, and then we're going to replicate that measurement at the bottom right here. Whatever amount of overhang the stretcher has, just split the difference between the 2 legs. Now, as a quick note, you should take this measurement separately if one set of legs sits outside of the other set like mine do here. And that's because the measurement will be different for both sets of legs. So I pre-drilled a hole and fixed the stretchers in place. Now I do want to pay attention to how high the stretcher sits above the foot, because like I said, this will determine how the trellis sits on the bed. So however much leg is below the stretcher is up to you. Just make sure you replicate that measurement on all 4 legs. Mine ended up being 3 3/4, which I felt like was just enough overhang that I could screw these legs to the side of the bed if I needed to for a little extra durability. So like I said, pre-drill, screw it in place, replicate the measurement on the other side, and we're good to go. So let's go test fit the trellis onto the bed. It fits perfectly, and this is the one feature that I changed from Mitch's design, which is that my trellis will pivot, and that's great because I can change the size for whatever I'm planting. So the final thing we need to do is attach the strings, and I measured every 2 inches because that's the recommendation for planting peas and beans, and that's really the only thing I anticipate using this trellis for, though the design could be adapted to grow anything from tomatoes to a flowering vine. Now, I tried several different ways of attaching the string to the bar, and they were all failures until I decided to drill holes in the bar so that I could do this. Like I said, I tried a few different ways to attach the string, and what ended up happening with every other method was that when I went to pivot the trellis, like open or close it, the strings would either loosen or tighten, which is obviously something that you don't want to happen. And I assume that's because the distance between the stretchers going up to the top bar and back down was actually changing depending on how I mounted the string. If you don't understand what I'm saying, that's fine. Just drill the holes through the center of the top bar and you'll be just fine. Now this was definitely the most tedious and time-consuming part of the build, but it was all worth it in the end when I could step back and admire my brand new trellis. So let me know what you think in the comments. Is this the ultimate pea and bean trellis? And will you be replicating it for yourself in your garden?